Future of South Asia, Strategic Balances and Alliances. The panelists are Hasanul Haq Inu, a Member of Parliament in Bangladesh. He heads the Jatiya Samajtantrik Dal. Shaurya Doval, a financial consultant and a public policy thinker. He leads a Delhi-based think tank, India Foundation. Namal Rajapaksa, a member of the Sri Lankan Parliament and a lawyer by training. Michael Kugelman, Deputy Director of the Asia Program at the Woodrow Wilson International Center. He has written on Pakistan, India and Afghanistan. Zakia Wardak. Wardak has been working for the upliftment of women in Afghanistan. Ranjit Ray, former Indian ambassador to Nepal. He was instrumental in initiating the peace process through the 12-point agreement between Maoists and political parties.
The Global Summit here, the WION Global Summit, because I can actually claim I think I've had so far the most diverse panel. So I'm very honored to have you all with us. Thank you very much. I have a deep love of South Asia because I've traveled a lot in the region and I see the similarities, I see the differences. We're a beautiful collection of people, actually, when you look at the diversity and yet the commonalities. And I'm glad we're looking here at some of the strategic balances and alliances that we can look at and discuss. As a journalist, accidentally, I'm actually a failed doctor in the sense that my degree was in medical physiology. But as a journalist, I guess I developed a healthy skepticism for politics in general. And it's always illustrated by a story that the former British Prime Minister John Major tells about, when it comes to getting mixed messages. He said that when the Soviet Union fell, he was invited to visit the then Russian president, Boris Yeltsin, in Moscow. And he said, I never expected to ever walk the corridors of power in the Kremlin. It just was not it wasn't conceivable to me. And the Cold War just kind of ended suddenly. So he said, I was walking through the Kremlin with Boris Yeltsin and thought, he's such an eccentric man. I must ask him a tough question. So he said, President Yeltsin, if I could ask you to describe the state of your country's economy in one word, what would you say? And Yeltsin said, good. And he thought, how can he say that? It's all falling apart. So he said, all right, President Yeltsin, if you could use more than one word, what would you say? And Yeltsin said, not good. So you realize what happens as journalists. We get worried about the messages we hear. I'm very honored, as I say, to have this panel because I'd like to look at some of the issues that might actually shape the South Asian region in the coming years. So I'm going to start with a couple of questions, open it up to you as the participants of this event to ask questions too. But I'm going to just kick off with a question to each person to get their perspective on some of the issues. And Hasanul Haq, it's been a pleasure to talk with you, sir, offline, if you like, and discover some of the history you've had with Bangladesh and some of the tasks you've been involved with. It may sound a strange, but I hope relevant question. Why is South Asia particularly relevant to the world, do you think?
Thank you, Rizkan. Thank you, my co-panelists. Greetings from Sheikh Hasina, our Prime Minister in Bangladesh. I represent 160 million people of Bangladesh. Well, I had been listening to the panelists from the morning. Interesting education for me. Having said that, why South Asia is relevant to the world at the moment? Well, South Asia is the oldest civilization in the world. Second, South Asia is not only South Asia, South Asia is also global because of diaspora. South Asia is again re-emerging in all aspects of life and economy. South Asian market is global. Within South Asia, market is very little, but it's global. Every country is connected globally. South Asian is more globally connected because from within, we are outreaching to the international market. For example, Bangladesh is the second largest RMG exporter. South Asia is, with the Bangladesh, is the second largest United Nations peacekeepers. South Asia is nuclear South Asia. South Asia has already registered its presence in the space. And South Asia's entertainment, sports, led by India, has crossed beyond South Asian borders and has an impact and setting marks on the global arena. And lastly, South Asia, at the moment led by India, is a great actor in the information communication technology by producing softwares. So these are the relevant issues which make South Asia more pertinent to the world scenario.
I'll touch on some of the points you raised as we get into the discussion, because again, the important thing is that even trading within South Asia has to be boosted. So we will touch on that in a moment. Let me just follow up with one quick question, though. In terms of how Bangladesh has been as a country, where do you see it fitting into the South Asia jigsaw puzzle?
Well, 160 million people is a human capital. And for the last 10 years under Sheikh Hasina, we have been successful coming out from the old militarization and religious communalism. We are in a transition to democracy, and we are pursuing a policy of zero tolerance policy towards terrorism. Mind that religious fanaticism and religious parties are exactly veiled terrorism, mass terrorism. So never believe that, never believe in them, because religious fundamental political parties are always pursuing a dual role with a secret agenda, and they are basically terroristic networks. So Islam is never represented by them. They are using Islam, but they are not Islamists. So they are anti-religion, anti-state, anti-democracy. What we are doing in Bangladesh, we are pursuing a policy of inclusiveness in the economic field, the policy of inclusiveness in the political field, and for the last 10 years, we have doubled our agricultural production. We are the fourth largest sweetwater fish producing country. We are the third largest vegetable producing country, and we are exporting garments to the world market, second largest. So this is Bangladesh, registering more than 7.8% GDP growth rate per annum, and we are expecting to touch by June 8% growth rate within Bangladesh. Bangladesh is pursuing a policy of non-interference to the neighbors, and we don't think that playing a proxy game for a third country using our soil is not healthy for the region and for Bangladesh. So we strictly follow our policy of keeping ourselves aware from the grand rivalries emerging in the world scenario and the regional Asian scenario.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm going to get back to some of those points you made. I grabbed a seat, though I actually prefer to stand, but I think I'm going to mess up their shots on camera, so I'm going to join you guys here. Zakia Wardak, it's really good to have you with us too, and great to have the voice of Afghanistan on the panel too. A country, of course, such a beautiful country and amazing people, a country that's been torn in many directions. Let's get your perspective on what's happening in Afghanistan now and how that fits into the picture of South Asia too.
Let me first thank WION for such a great opportunity. The future of South Asia looks promising, but if Afghanistan doesn't excel and not become unstable, I'm sure the surrounding country will get hurt with it. I wanted to touch three areas right now what's happening. First is regarding the electoral system, and also the second thing I wanted to touch is peace talk, and also about a little bit of talk about the economy. Parliamentary election happened in October of 2008. And we had some success and we had some challenges. The success was that over 2,000 people was candidate, and they were competing with each other. And the largest amount of candidates were in Kabul, which is 104, and 108 of them were women. And the other success that we had is that despite the security challenges that we had, many people came out and they did vote, and many women came out and they voted. And also recently a reform in the law and the electoral system. That was the successes, but the challenges that due to security incidents, many candidates were killed, include my own brother. And also due to the enormous fraud and mismanagement in the election, 12 commissioners were fired by the president of Afghanistan recently because they were not managing it well. And it's also the Kabul's candidates are right now protesting and they want re-election. That's also another challenges. And because of the mismanagement of and because of the lack of capability of election commission, the presidential election postponed for 4 months. And that when it's postponed, there is a conspiracy of interim government. And also, let me come to the peace talk. My recommendation, I wanted to how we can relate this to the South Asia, the South Asia countries. We have to come together, and I believe that South Asian countries have to demand a transparency. We have to work together and to become a strong nation, a strong South Asia. Let me come to the peace. There is Taliban is talking over a peace with the United States over the future of Afghanistan, and also they are talking to the region, but they're not talking to Afghanistan's government, and they're not talking to Afghans, any average Afghan. They're not talking to any average woman, and I believe that the international community should keep in mind that the peace, Afghan-owned peace process should be embraced by all Afghans, only Afghans. And whatever benefits Afghanistan, I'm sure it's going to benefit the region and also the world. I'm going to come to the economy lately, which is, this is also a very hot topic these days, which how we can be related to other regional countries. That past decades Afghanistan was struggling regarding the economy because of the uncertainty in politics, and because of the corruption, because of the security. But lately it's improving, and we have the Pakistan with it closed transit road. The Chabahar has been built, which is, now we have a transitional way that to go to India and do business. And also there is a Lapis Lazuli transitional route, which is we are connecting to the Europe. And also there is we have a business or contracts with India and Turkish, and we are exporting zafaran. Like before we said that, this morning Mr. Haqqani was saying that South Asia countries, they don't trade among each other.
Right.
The only way is that we can make each other strong. We should be united. First, we have to fight against terrorism.
So I'll touch on the economy in a second. I'm going to just get on the relationship first from everyone.
Sure.
So when we have the questions, but I want to touch on the economy side and the role of women, especially in Afghanistan, in just a few minutes. Let me bring in Namal Rajapaksa here. And again, Sri Lanka, a fantastic country that's come through a long strife and has really kind of pulled up its socks and put itself on the map. Let me get your perspective on how, again, the example of what's happened within Sri Lanka and how it fits into the South Asia platform, how it can be an example to also build strategic alliances and relationships.
Thank you, WION, for giving this opportunity, and my dear panelists. Well, Sri Lanka, as you know, have come through 30 years of war, and we have been fighting terrorism for the last 30 years, and finally in 2009, where we ended the 30 years of war. However, at the same time, we started concentrating on our infrastructure development, especially to develop Sri Lanka as an hub on aviation and maritime, to make it a logistic hub. Because geographically, location of Sri Lanka has never been utilized before. At one point, we have been conquered, colonized, and we had 2 civil uprisings, as you correctly stated, one in south, one in north. The northern youth uprising ended up becoming the most ruthless terrorist organization in the world, who assassinated leaders in Sri Lanka and leaders in India, like Honorable Rajiv Gandhi at one point. So finally, now as a country, we are concentrating on our people-centric development to make sure that we can be a progressive partner in our regional development. Because from one side, it is the South Indian Ocean, where the One Belt, One Route initiative, and 50% of the maritime ships passes Sri Lanka. And on the other hand, India, one of the fastest growing economies in the world, and one of the biggest consumer markets in the world, and being our neighbor. We believe Sri Lanka, if we, as a nation, that we concentrate on people-centric development with our economic partners to make sure that we contribute to the regional development. Politically, government make decisions, but as a nation, we strongly believe in a non-aligned policy. And we strongly believe the NAM principles of non-interferences, non-aggression, territorial integrity. We strongly believe on those policies. And we believe, as a nation, we should develop as a maritime and aviation hub where we can contribute and we can be an active partner in the South Asian region and benefit mutually from the Indian growth as well. India is our closest alliance, closest neighbor, and culturally we are bond. And India is the fastest growing economy at the moment in the world. And India is a youthful country. So we are looking at a new approach, new partnership, new development, initiatives with our neighboring countries, and be an active partner in the regional development.
Thank you very much. I'll include more of the topics you raised too in the discussion. But Shaurya Doval, good to get you in. You know, one of the things that hasn't really been discussed is, as we talk about South Asia as a region and building its strength, China hasn't really been talked about much. But of course, that's the giant shadow over much of this part of the world when you think about, or the South Asia region, when you think about its position. How do you see China fitting into all of this and how it might affect South Asia's own regional alliances and balance?
I think before I sort of answer your question, because I think while China will be an important player, there is actually something even more significant that's going on in this region, and which I think will be probably the pivot around which the next 20, 25 years, you know, as this region approaches its 100 years of post-colonization, will be the single most pivot around which things will rotate. For a moment, if you ignore this whole discussion on Pakistan and, you know, the sort of Pakistan being the outlier, in this region, what is going on in India right now, and people have alluded to, is probably the biggest miracle that is the India's economic growth. That people have alluded to here in these conversations as the fastest growing economy, but its implications for this region haven't really been fully understood. Because what's actually going to happen in the next decade, that is between 2019 and 2030, India will add economic wealth, which is greater than what India has added to itself in the last 70 years of its independence. So thereabouts more than $3 trillion of GDP or wealth will come, and India will move from being a poor nation, a country born in sort of scarcity, to prosperity and being a prosperous nation. Now think of this as a bucket with water just overflowing. It's a tsunami of prosperity coming this region's way. And even if India wanted to, India can't confine it to itself. The collateral beneficiaries of this are going to be this region around us. And Pakistan, for some reason, has opted out of this desire, but that's for them to decide. But the rest of the region is actually going to benefit from this.
What are the triggers that you're discussing? What is going to trigger that degree of prosperity?
The sheer wonder, what Einstein called as the eighth wonder of the world, which is the power of compounding. Irrespective of which government in India, and Sybil referred to it in the morning discussion, irrespective of which government in India, India will grow at the minimum at 7%, which means that India, by and large, will triple from $3 trillion to $6 trillion at the least in the next 10 years. Now, once this prosperity comes, it will come India's ability to create, and all the other factors are for granted. Cultural affinity, this being one region, this has always been the same people, etc. So it is but natural that countries will plug and play, and Bangladesh is that's a smart country that has seen this opportunity come its way and is getting itself ready to be able to just plug and play into this opportunity. Where most people haven't spoken today is that India has moved for the first time to what is through its GST into one big common market. This makes a huge opportunity for all these countries in this region, again, to be able to just completely plug and play. You know, this is a train on 180 kilometers. None of these countries need to do anything. They don't need to come up with their new strategy, their new policy, their new unique angle in the world. All they need to do is just latch on their bogie to this train right? Now, to this engine. And I think that's a phenomenal opportunity for just the entire region, because once we move out of this prosperity into this $8,000 to $10,000 of per capita income, many of the existing problems will go away. A new set of problems will emerge, but many of these things will go away. In this, China, and sort of answering your limited question, will play a role. If I were to be an extreme pessimist, they will try to limit India's ability to be able to achieve these objectives, and therefore may try to slow down this process. If China plays a more symbiotic role, then it can do things to accelerate the process. But I think once this prosperity comes, and then with that, if I layer on the cultural affinity and things, I really don't see much scope for them. Because if their calling card which has been the economic prosperity, well, India is going to be having the same card with all the other factors of that they don't have. It's not even a decade, it's not even 5 years. We are talking literally in years. And you can already see the manifestation of that with India signing billions of dollars to Nepal and to Sri Lanka, and to being able to do this. And I think that's really, to me, the most interesting part of what's going to happen in South Asia in the next 10 years.
All right, you've raised some interesting topics we're going to touch on there too. I want to bring in Ambassador Ranjit Ray here. And do you feel like you're on a high-speed train?
No, absolutely. And I think, just to take over from what Shaurya said, just to give you one statistic, in 2030, in purchasing power parity terms, our GDP would be the same as the US. So India is really, going to be one of the poles of this multipolar world. So obviously, that has huge implications for the manner in which the region develops. But I think we need to do much more to integrate our region. And it's not necessarily going to happen automatically. I think, a very serious effort is required to improve connectivity. The infrastructure is abysmal. We really need to pull up our socks in terms of the manner in which we implement projects. So there's a lot to be done to promote trade, tourism. It's not going to happen automatically, and I think this should really be the focus of our policy. How do you have an economically integrated South Asia? How do you have a situation where each of our neighbors has a vested interest in India's economic growth and prosperity, and they benefit from it? Because you see, you can look at Indian economic growth as an opportunity or sometimes as a threat. And if you see it as a threat, then you're constantly trying to balance it with some external player. So I think a lot of effort and a lot of work needs to go in to ensure that we are economically integrated.
Okay. Michael Kugelman, I'll bring you in here and get your take on what Shaurya said about China's impact too, because, of course, it can be a very significant juxtaposition.
Thank you. No, absolutely. I think that perhaps the biggest headline in South Asia these days is a decidedly non-South Asia related issue, and that is China. Absolutely. You look at the Belt and Road Initiative. I think it really is one of the most profoundly significant developments for international relations of our time. It's so, in terms of how big it is, how much money is involved, these things don't come along every year. It's really a once-in-a-generation type of development. And it really has clear implications for, I would think, all of the countries represented in this panel and others. And clearly, the BRI issue brings to mind talk about China's increasing competition with India and all that. And I think there's something to be said for that, because you look at how China is not only trying to deepen its footprint in areas of South Asia where it is already quite present, such as Pakistan, but also increasingly trying to become more present in areas where it has had a smaller, more shallow footprint, such as Nepal or Bhutan. But I think, despite all that, we shouldn't underplay the issue of cooperation, both actual and potential, for China and India. I believe the China-India trade relationship is the largest of any bilateral trade relationship in the world. And I think you could also look at some increasing convergences between China and India. You look at Afghanistan, for example. These are two countries that clearly want Afghanistan to be a more stable place. And looking at the issue of terrorism, the Belt and Road Initiative will not be able to survive, much less really continue or be able to do much at all in the face of terrorism, including terrorism that emanates from Pakistan. I do think as the only American on the panel, maybe I'll just say a very brief word about, how Washington looks at this. And I think that the big issue here is that, the Trump administration came out with its first national security strategy, and it very explicitly said that strategic rivalry is the U.S.'s biggest national security threat. So that really is code for China being a concern for the United States, because the U.S. views China as its biggest strategic rival. So the idea of China increasing its presence in South Asia is certainly something that's been seen with some significant concern by the Trump administration.
Michael, thank you very much. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to open it up to get your participation with questions. So if you'd like to ask something on this topic, please do raise your hand. I promise I will try to get to the hands in the order in which they go up. Sometimes I don't seem to have full control on that, but I will try. And then indicate who you are and who you'd like to direct the question to. So please do put your hands up if you have a question. It'd be great to have your contribution. So we'll come to you first. Thank you.
Yeah, my name is Ravi Pandit. I've been 30 years now in UAE, and I've been into finance business throughout my life. And I'm a Kashmiri Pandit. So my question is to the Bangladesh representative. Sir, you said that people who commit terrorism are not Muslims, nothing to do with Islam. Now, don't you think then the vast majority of the silent Muslims are not able to control these terrorist Muslims? And if not, why not? In your country, the population of Hindus have declined drastically. If the powers that are not able to control, then I think you have to do some long thinking to correct your narrative of Islam and save those people, save your moderates. The latest is Mehdi, in London, he was attacked for just talking of moderate Islam. So I think it's time for silent, moderate Islamists to give the correct narrative of Islam and save the world. Thank you.
And perhaps link it to how it fits into South Asia, perhaps unifying a bit more rather than simply a debate on religion.
Thank you very much. As you know that Bangladesh, the majority population is Muslims. But in spite of that, when 1947, when the subcontinent was partitioned, within 23 years, these majority Muslims in the eastern side revolted against Pakistan and said clearly that religion has nothing to do with nation building. Because from Algeria to Indonesia, there are many Muslims staying in many nation states with different languages and cultures. That is the situation. In Bangladesh, we have proved in 1971 war, when the Pakistanis tried to portray us as Kafirs and anti-Indians. But we posed ourselves as humans and Bengalis and fought a bloody liberation war, which said that nothing to do with Islam. We are fighting military dictators of Pakistan, the elite cliques of Pakistan, nothing to do with the Pakistani people. So point is that the terrorists are never backed by the majority of the people in any Muslim country. That is why the terrorists are gradually losing ground from Algeria to Indonesia. So in Bangladesh, in the previous sessions, I heard that state-sponsored terrorism. That is a problem. That is a problem because in Bangladesh, when in 1975, when Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, the father of the nation, was killed, and the military took over, and subsequent military takeovers, they openly, intentionally patronize Islamist groups. And that is how they again superimpose the terrorist networks on the body politics of Bangladesh. Now, when the democratic movement started against military, then we again fought back, and the terrorists were defeated and the military is overthrown. From 91 now on, the terrorists are marginalized, and through elections the secular democratic forces are placed in power. So I think Islam is, they try to misinterpret Islam, but the real Muslims on the ground never take their analysis or interpretations. That is why terrorists across the world are marginalized. So also, whatever Pakistan is trying to do through ISI or other intelligence networks, they are not successful. Mind that terrorist networks can create a problem here and there, but there is no chance of taking state power. So nothing to worry about. The point is there is bloodshed only, but we can come out of this situation if we pursue a policy of secularism and democracy. My point is that in the South Asia, for the last 60, 70 years, the political leaders pursued a wrong state policy of state security. Pursuing a policy of state security, every country has piled up military hardwares. And in the end, South Asia is now sitting on 3 dangerous bombs: poverty bomb, religious terrorist bomb, and nuclear bomb. If you don't want to defuse these bombs, South Asia has no future. And for that, we think, let us start diffusing the poverty bomb and the terrorist bomb. That will help us to give us peace dividend, and then we can look into the nuclear bomb. But my point here, for that, we need better connectivity, and better integration. In the era of globalization, we don't have any other thing. We are discussing about India-Pakistan rivalry. We are discussing about India-China rivalry. But if you look into the statistics, India's largest trading partner at the moment is China with $70 billion. And through Wagah border of Pakistan, the Pakistan-India trade is increasing. And if you look at the Indian situation, India is cooperating in the BIMSTEC, BBIN, and other, beyond the SAARC region, the alliances, India is cooperating. So India is outreaching. So according to Putin, the point is that what he said that the China is a dangerous threat economically. It's a colossal giant coming up. But to develop the Russian economy, let the Chinese wind touch our sail. That will benefit us. So it is a question of political decision how the Indian elephant and the Chinese dragon will harmoniously cooperate to have an influence on the world situation. And we think that the Indian elephant and the Chinese dragon, if they cooperate, they will definitely be an economic master of the world.
Right.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry I have to stop you there, Minister. I may have slipped into some alternative time-space continuum, but I think we're out of time on this session. Is that correct? Can I just get a wave from someone? I think we are. So I think we've finished on this session, unfortunately, because it says 3:10. So I'm just going to double-check that. Can someone wave to me if we are at the end of this session? Correct? 5 minutes? Okay, so listen, we only have 5 minutes. I'm sorry, we've got a panel of 6 in a very short period. Can I get a line from each of you on where you see what would be the single factor? What single factor would create greater balance and alliance in South Asia? And perhaps I can start with you, please, Zakia. Just one line, please.
I would say that first we have to get together and fight terrorism and work on a mechanism how we can have a trade among South Asia countries to be able be economically be strong and empower each country, and also have to look after each other. And we see that there's some problems in some countries. The South Asia countries should get together and help them. Then how they can solve the problem.
Perhaps Namal Rajapaksa, I can ask you.
Well, economic cooperation, trade, and development is a way out for terrorism. We have fought against the most ruthless terrorist organization for 30 years. What we learn, the outcome of the war, is that the poverty, unemployment, uneducation is the main reason for terrorist organizations to arise. So if, as a region, if we cooperate on people-centric development, keep populistic arguments of geopolitics aside, let countries prosper with economic partners, and move forward as a region, if then stability in individual countries, political, economic, and social stability will contribute to the region.
People-centric, that's great. First time I've heard that. It's a strong expression as well. Shaurya, what do you think?
I think in India's ability to spread its economic prosperity and growth with the neighboring nations in a manner which allows them to not feel threatened by it while respecting their sovereignty and dignity, to be able to use this as a tool for betterment of the region. The only exception being Pakistan, because somehow it doesn't fit in this calculus.
Okay. Ambassador Ranjit.
Economic prosperity, spreading economic prosperity. But on China, I do want to say, make one comment. You know, it's a very multi-layered relationship with China. There is a possibility of confrontation, as we saw in Doklam, and obviously with this CPEC, the China-Pakistan relationship is a major security threat for India. But there are also elements of cooperation, as the minister from Bangladesh mentioned, and as Michael said, there could be convergences as well in our neighborhood. I'll just give you one instance. If our goal is economic integration of South Asia, and if, say, India and China can do joint projects in some country, for instance, take Nepal on hydropower, and if that hydropower project integrates Nepal with India and the rest of South Asia with Bangladesh, perhaps that's something that we can look at, and we should explore that possibility.
All right, thank you, sir. That's an interesting idea, third-party bringing collaboration. And Michael, just a quick thought there, one line.
Well, I just think that there needs to be more and better infrastructure. I mean, we've heard so often today how South Asia is the least integrated region in the world, and you know we know why. But the very simple matter of the fact that you have such poor infrastructure throughout the region makes it very difficult to actually move forward on having more trade. Even if the political tensions could be set aside between certain countries in the region, if you don't have better roads, it's going to be hard to have more trade. And I think the other step is to figure out a way to make the SARC work better. I don't think ultimately it'll be sustainable to try to fracture into different types of regional organizations like BIMSTEC. Ideally, you'd have all of the South Asian countries working together in a more robust regional organization. But given how SARC has struggled, in great part because of the problems in the India-Pakistan relationship, I think that's really going to be a challenge moving forward.
Michael, thank you very much. Minister, I'll give you the last word. You gave us the three-bomb theory, which is very interesting as well. What would be the one thing you think?
Thank you very much. Apart from many problems in this region, there are three problems. One is insecurity, another is lack of confidence, another is mistrust. So I said there is a trust deficit, confidence deficit, security deficit. And if you want to overcome these three deficits, then we need to go for certain steps. That is number one. Beyond SARC, can we go for a joint security framework with a two-tier agenda, software and hardware? The software is climate change, environment and other issues, and the hardware is, as you know that. And second is, Ganga, Brahmaputra, Meghna in the eastern region, this basin is the harboring largest port in the country, world. So, Ganga, Brahmaputra, Meghna, basin-wise integrated water authority development will open up a new golden door of cooperation and prosperous. So that is one thing. And second thing, all the bilateral treaties need to be executed smoothly, and no country should play a proxy game for the third country within the South Asia and beyond South Asia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. So, a big thanks to the panel. I'm sorry it was so short, but I thank you very much for your contribution. I think we got some great points out there. Thank you.